Hey everyone, welcome back to another exciting episode of The Snecker Show. My name is Ben and I'm your host today, as I am with every other episode. Just so you know, The Snecker Show is now the #2 home improvement channel on YouTube, just behind This Old House and many other fine channels. Thank you for your support. Today we're going to take a look at Purpleheart, which is a very heavy, very dense, exotic wood from Central and South America. This is not stained, it's not dyed, it's not painted. This is the actual color of the wood. It's called Purpleheart because it's purple. So, when you first cut into a Purpleheart board, you're going to notice something a little bit disappointing. It's actually brown on the inside. It's going to look like this on the outside and look like that on the inside. And that's because the natural color of Purpleheart is in fact brown, but over time, either from, I'm not sure if it's from the oxygen in the air or from UV rays. I think it's more from the air than anything else because I've kept stuff in a box and the color has changed. But anyway, over time this brown wood will turn more purple. And then after it turns purple, it starts to slowly decline and it turns brown again. So this edge right here, this has been sitting out probably for 4 or 5 years since I cut it. This has probably been several years longer. So this side is starting to turn more brown. And then you see another piece here. This is actually Purpleheart on that side of this pencil holder, but this is so old that it's lost a lot of its color. Now there are different ways to mitigate this, and what a lot of people do is they use some kind of a UV blocker like spar urethane or some exterior deck finishes will have a UV blocker in them. And that's fine for a lot of projects, but if you're working on something that's going to get used in the kitchen, have food contact, or if you just don't feel like using a spar urethane, like for example I use water locks on most of my stuff, or if you want to use a water-based finish, that's limited options for UV stuff. Basically, you got to find a way to deal with that purple color dissipating over time. So what we're going to do today is look at a couple examples first of different pieces of Purpleheart, and then we're going to put it in the oven, because I found that with thermally modifying the wood, just popping it in your oven for a little bit of time, it will get deeper colored, deeper purple colored, and that color will go all the way through the board and it seems to stick. This is at least a year old. It's been the same color for the whole time. It hasn't deepened, it hasn't lightened, it's just stayed purple. And when I cut into the end, it's the exact same color on the inside. So here I have another piece. You can compare these two. The Purpleheart in this board it's probably been sitting around my shop for 10 years. I might do something with it eventually. But this one that I put in the oven is a much deeper color. And then we have a few other examples here. Here's some Purpleheart and Cherry that was the side of a box. I don't even remember who has this box. This is a little leftover piece. That's still got a little bit of purple in it. Here is some Purple and Ash. This was, again, this Purpleheart was put in the oven, so it's got a darker color. I think I put it in for a little bit too long. So I want to experiment and see what the right amount of time is. This still has some reasonably purple color. I think I planed this down a year or two ago. And I have a small piece of thermally modified Purpleheart with some plum wood on the outside. And here is one of the pieces from my first thermally modified wood experiment videos. You can go back and watch that if you want to. I did just a whole bunch of samples of different kinds of wood and just cooked them until they caught on fire. This is one of the pieces left over from that experiment. And here again we have a small piece of Purpleheart in the center. It's lost almost all of its color. This thing is really old. And you can't even tell here, but that's Purpleheart in the middle. This is probably going to be turned into a ring or something. It's got layers of veneer on the outside. So what we're going to do, since I already baked these ones and this is too small, I'm going to take this beautiful piece of wood and reluctantly cut it up into smaller pieces. And going to leave some of the outside so you see what the current color is. And then whatever I cut on the inside will be the fresh start. And I'll mark both sides so we know what we're dealing with. And then I'll pop it in the oven and set it for a consistent temperature and just start removing pieces every maybe 15 minutes, maybe every 30 minutes, just to see how they change over time. So I guess let's get started. Okie dokie, I think that should be enough. Pretty good collection here. You can see that that's the inside. It's lighter and a little bit browner. These actually aren't really as distinct as they are sometimes. Sometimes the inside is really brown, like significantly different, and the outside gets a deeper purple. I think that depends on the tree, but that's what it looks like. And for comparison, here's a piece of thermally modified. It's a little bit more deep purple. Certainly a big difference between these two. So what I'm going to do is I'll pop these in the oven, and I won't waste your time watching the whole thing cook, but I'll put this side up so that it's getting exposed to the air, and I'll hold on to a control piece, and then after we're done, we'll lay everything out with some kind of a chart and see what the results were. Well, that was a fun experiment, but now I really just want to do more experimentation. So I got some answers and I got some more questions. This is the results of the baking experiment. I have here in the first row baked at 250 degrees for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and 120 minutes. And that's 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And then on the next row, bumped it up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit for 30, 60, 90, and 120. You really don't see anything in the first row. I think 250 is just out. That's not enough to really darken the wood any. After a couple hours at 300, you start to see a bit of purpleization in the wood. But then when you get up to 350 degrees, I would say that after 30 minutes at 350 degrees is where I saw the temperature or the color of the wood turn out the way I really like it. And I did another one just to be sure, and it came out exactly the same. So it looks like for Purpleheart, I would go with 350 degrees for 1 hour, 60 minutes. And if you want to go darker, you can, but I think after this point, after 90 minutes, it really just, especially 120 minutes, looks a little too dark in my opinion, and you lose some of that purple. So the part that I thought was interesting is, I was saying, this is a way to make the color last, and that's been my experience so far, is that the color will last a long time after it's modified in the oven, and it goes all the way through. So the wood is darkened all the way through, so if you sand it or cut it, you don't lose that purple color. However, I was noticing this old spoon that is actually a piece of thermally modified Purpleheart. It's been sitting in the kitchen for a while. I think it's been through the dishwasher once or twice, which definitely roughed it up. But this thing is turned almost kind of white gray. And then I also had this cutting board here, which had some thermally modified Purpleheart on the edges, and that still has a little bit of purple color. But it's I think this piece was pretty dark when I started, though, so it's lost a little bit with time, but otherwise held up pretty well. But it's not quite the same as this. So I got curious as far as what actually makes the wood get darker or get more purple with time. As I mentioned in the beginning, some people say it's exposure to light, and others say it's exposure to actually I just hear people say it's exposure to light, and that may or may not be true, and I really haven't done any kind of controlled testing to verify that. But what I have noticed is that if I put Purpleheart in a box, it's going to change color. And if I have a couple pieces that are sitting on top of each other like that, when I remove one later, you're going to see a purple outline, and then a lighter area where it was shielded from the light or the air or whatever. I really don't think that it has anything to do with the UV rays, because I have some older projects that have water-based finishes on them and that aren't UV resistant, and they look great. And then I have newer projects with I think it's the oil that's inside the wood that is what's changing color, and when you bake it, that oil gets a little bit darker. That would also explain why this spoon has lost some of its color, especially after going through the dishwasher. I think the oil that provides the purple color may have been washed out, and I'm not positive, but here's one of the reasons that sort of confirmed my suspicion. That's a jar of lacquer thinner. It was clear lacquer thinner, a little bit of an amber color, but right after I took the other 350 degree 60-minute pieces out of the oven, I dropped it inside this jar with lacquer thinner. First I tried it with water, and that didn't do anything, but Water isn't going to dissolve oil, so try it with some kind of a solvent. Put it in there with lacquer thinner, and after a couple of minutes of shaking it up with the wood in there, the water turned pink, I guess would be the color there. So it looks like it took some of the oil out of the wood, and that appears to be the challenge. You can darken the wood up, so if you're in a non-wet, non-soapy, non-solvent condition, the wood will probably stay that color. But if you are in any kind of conditions where that oil is going to get attacked by a solvent, then it's likely to change and become brown. That's what I got out of this one. Hopefully there are some answers for you there. At least you know that you can go 350 for 60 minutes, and that'll give you a nice purple color all the way through. And I'll pull up my control piece real quick as well. Just I was supposed to have that on the table when we started. I had a control piece, and this one, I wrapped it up to block the light, and I wrapped it up to block the air. So that was double verification that, so that's what we started with right there. And you can see it's really not much different from the one that was baked at 250 for 30 minutes. Definitely quite a difference between these two here. So that was the original starter piece. And the last thing that I'm going to do, just out of curiosity, I was wondering if this thing was still going to be purple on the inside, since it was baked in the oven before. I think this piece was overcooked a little bit, so it's probably going to be darker like that. But if I cut this thing open, this is one of my wife's favorite spoons. So I might get in trouble for doing this, but to mitigate how much trouble I get into, I made her a new one today out of plum wood that is very similar in design. So I'm hoping to do the old, for copyright reasons, I can't do the Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark thing, but I'm going to try to do, you know, one of these items and just put that in her kitchen and see if she's happy with it, because it's new, and then I'm going to run this one through the bandsaw and see what it looks like on the inside. All right, well, there we go. It's still purple on the inside. So it looks like this, the white chalky type color was mostly just on the outside, probably from exposure to soap and a little bit of abuse and abrasion. But on the inside, that's really not, well, it's almost closer to the original piece. So point is, that wasn't all the way through. That was just on the outside. So maybe if you have an old Purpleheart project that's lost a little bit of its color, you might be able to give it a little bit of a sanding to get down to the good stuff. But I'm going to say that if you had baked it in the oven first, you'll have a pretty good color in there to get back to. So that's it. I hope there's something that was useful in there. I'm really curious about this. I might put that piece back in there and let it soak for a while, and maybe to see if my theory is right about the purple washing off, I will glue all of these together into a cutting board, and that way I can track over time how the color changes in each one of these pieces when it's exposed to the elements. I don't know if this ever happens to anybody else, but sometimes I get started working on something and then I get distracted with other projects for a while. You should check out my Instagram page. And then I never finished the project that I was working on. So I'm trying to get back to this video that I started a month ago. This has been sitting in the shop, getting moved around a little bit here and there. For comparison, let's go back to our control piece here that was wrapped up and sealed to protect it from air and light. And you can tell what these looked like in the beginning. So that's a bit of a difference. That's more brown and that's more purple. Really a big difference next to the 350 degree piece. Anywho, we remember this guy right here as well. This is one of the pieces that I think that was not baked. Put it in lacquer thinner and it soaked out the oil and gave us that pink color. And let's introduce that one now. This was one of the pieces that was baked at 350 degrees. And that resulted in a deeper color in the solvent. I let both of these soak for about 12 hours, just overnight. And it kind of confirms my suspicion that the reason that the kitchen utensils and cutting boards were turning a little bit white and chalky on the surface was from the oil that provides the color to the wood being washed out with soap. And especially if you happen to put it in the dishwasher soap is a lot harsher. So that'll wash that oil right out of there. So I'm not really sure what to do with that. Baking wood in the oven does, as far as the Purple Heart goes, does seem to leave a relatively permanent finish on there unless you use it in the kitchen and then you lose some of the color. So I'm not sure how to stop that from happening. If anybody has any good ideas, I'm sure everybody watching would be interested to hear what you have to say. Just post it down in the comments. And maybe we'll do some more experimentation later, and if I get around to gluing this up into a cutting board, I'll post an update in a couple years or something. So thanks for watching and have fun.